Who should the Giants sign next? Is the city of San Francisco hurting the Giants' ability to attract free agents? And which Giants players could be on the trade block this offseason? All that and more. It's another edition of the Kerry Crowley Show. We've got an extended edition today as Roger Munter, who writes the great Substack, There Are Giants, is here to join us to break down all of those subjects and so much more. But before I start, I want to touch on a few things really quickly. If you've been watching this show, if you've enjoyed it, please comment, like, subscribe, do whatever you can to boost this channel. It's really, really helpful for me as we go through the off season, kind of get you set for the 2024 season where I prepare to be quite active on this channel. I've really enjoyed interacting with everyone on YouTube, discussing Shohei Ohtani to the Dodgers, the Yoshinobu Yamamoto rumors, and of course, Jung Hoo Lee and the San Francisco Giants. And so with that being said, before Roger and I kind of dive into whether or not the city of San Francisco and the perception of the city is hurting the Giants, I just want to say this. I was born and raised in San Francisco, fifth generation San Franciscan. I think it is the most beautiful city on the planet. And I think the number one thing the Giants must do is figure out a way to turn the city into a selling point for the team. And yes, there are going to be questions because of national media conversations about the Giants and about the city of San Francisco. But I'll tell you this, every player who I covered, and I was a beat reporter from 2017 to 2021, really fell in love with the city. And so you've got a leader in Logan Webb who clearly loves living in the Bay Area and representing the San Francisco Giants. You've got a member of the ownership group in Buster Posey who moved back to his hometown in Georgia, only then to come back to the Bay Area and live around the team that he fell in love with. You've got, ambassadors for the organization like Hunter Pence. Pat Burrell is joining the coaching staff. Bob Melvin is from the area. There are no excuses for the San Francisco Giants. Look, they're not in charge of city government, nor should they be in San Francisco, and you can debate the changes all you want on different social media platforms. But what I'm here to say today is the city of San Francisco, to me and to so many players who I covered, was a selling point. And I think that that can continue to be true if the Giants lean into what the city is and the potential that it still has. And so with that being said, here's the conversation. Here's Roger. Let's talk some baseball. Shohei Ohtani is a Dodger. Jung Hoo Lee is a Giant. We don't know where Yoshinobu Yamamoto is headed, but we do know that this is the KROG podcast. Kerry Crowley, Roger Munter, back with you discussing all things Giants baseball. Roger, Ohtani to the Dodgers. What do you think?
Oh, we're starting with the agony.
Had to do it.
I feel a lot better today than when we originally scheduled this program a couple of days ago. The last time we spoke last week, I think one of the last things I said was, I don't believe Ohtani to the Giants is a possibility. I have never believed it. I've always stop talking Ohtani. Even so, when I saw the news, I remember thinking, God, it's like we're back in 2018 with Giancarlo Stanton. And I literally thought, it's like we're back in the 70s again. And I grew up in a town that was literally split between the Bay Area and LA. Like Fresno did Giants broadcasts and Bakersfield did Dodgers. And let me tell you, in the 70s, there were not a lot of Giants fans outside of our family. There were a lot of Dodgers fans, and they made me feel bad. And I'm still mad about that. And I did flash back to that experience that night. It was just deflating. And I'm sure it was deflating as much inside as outside, as we saw from that great piece that Andy Baggerly did today. I don't know. What was your initial reaction when you saw it?
I don't want to say it was surprise because I thought he was going to the Dodgers all along, but the Friday Blue Jays wrinkle where, there was the plane being tracked and baseball Twitter was just in a chaotic state that maybe we've never seen before. It gave me the thought that maybe this isn't a done deal with the Dodgers. And so I don't know that I want to say I got my hopes up because I always felt like the Dodgers were probably the leading team all along. But I think that it gets worse for Giants fans when you hear that it's actually not 10 years, 700 million. And I know it's still being valued as a 430 something million dollar contract by Major League Baseball. And the cap hit or the CBT hit is still going to be 46 million, which is a record setter. But you would have liked the Dodgers to have to pay a little bit more for Shohei Ohtani than what they're paying right now, right?
I will tell you that as soon as the whole Shark Tank guy getting on the plane stuff, I'm like, now it seems like a good time to do housework. Let's just sweep and vacuum. And I recommend that for everybody on one of those days when Twitter zaniness is reaching higher and higher levels. I really want to ask you, Kerry Crowley, San Francisco native, about the narrative that keeps popping up more and more and more. And again, in the piece that Ennie did on The Athletic today, I think Buster Posey addressed it as perfectly as you can. It's like, whether it's fair or not, perception is reality, or it drives reality. It makes reality. That perception is clearly being amplified. How do you, as a hometown guy, respond or react when you hear this story come out all the time?
Yeah, I mean, Roger, I've wrestled with this a lot over the last 5, 6, 7 years. So probably when I made the decision to first move home to San Francisco after spending 6 years in Phoenix. And then I think it was the next 5 years in San Francisco. And now, of course, I'm on the East Coast, and looking at the way that people perceive the city, and really not just baseball, but how everyone in the United States perceives the city. And I think of it as the most beautiful place on the planet. Like, I was born there, raised there, moved back there. I think it doesn't get better than San Francisco. And I always said that on a traveling Major League Baseball beat, where I was fortunate to visit all these cities. And I made it a point to stay close to the ballpark in every town, because I worked for a newspaper at the time that had a travel budget to get me there, but I didn't have a budget to take Ubers all across the city or eat fancy meals out. It was basically like, if you can go to Chipotle and turn that into 2 meals today, that's going to work for you. So I always wanted to stay close to the ballpark in these cities. And I really think, like, being on the waterfront in San Francisco, which you can do, is just sensational. There's nothing like it. And then you have to square it with the national perception, and maybe a little bit of it is coming locally now too, that it's not a desirable place. And look, San Francisco's got its problems. I'd be the first one to admit I'd like to see a ton of change in the city. But I also think that if you're a Major League Baseball player evaluating your future, and you're going to sign a contract in excess of, say, I don't know, a couple $1 million a year, those problems are not your problems. You're living outside the city, and or you're living in a high security high rise. Those problems that the average San Franciscan deals with are not impacting you on a day-to-day basis. And it's not stopping you from living the glamorous lifestyle that you envision for yourself in Los Angeles, New York, Chicago, cities that also have some similar issues. And so it's hard, but I do also understand, because like, my perception of the city as the most beautiful place on the planet is not how other people see it. And I think that the way that Buster Posey characterized it to Bags in that article was very well said. Perception is reality. And unfortunately, regardless of which news sources you pay attention to or what you see on social media, I think there are a lot of people who just feel like if you're not on the inside, it's not as desirable a place as it once was. And so at the end of the day, I think that money's going to talk, and you're still going to be able to get the players like a Jung Hoo Lee if you pay a premium. And so I don't think it's going to impact more than a handful of guys, but maybe those handful of guys are the guys that the Giants have tried to land in recent years. Maybe it is an Ohtani, an Aaron Judge. And I think Bryce Harper was going to be willing to come to San Francisco. I just don't think the Giants made him the top offer.
Hit the number. That's right.
That's just a long way of saying I don't think it makes as big of a difference as people are making it out to be. And that's not to say that it won't continue to hurt the Giants in these pursuits, or, part of me thinks, just if you're the Giants, hire a PR firm that can tell you to highlight the best parts of the city in your pitch, like spend that money, right?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I mean, whether it's hard to talk people out of their fears or misapprehensions, no matter what those are. But they are going to have to think of a strategy that helps offset it. And whether that's, not just being an oracle, but going out to, a burrito place somewhere in town and like getting around and seeing the city as part of their pitch, some way or another, they're going to need to, and not just the player. It was interesting that Buster mentioned players' wives too.
Yeah.
Because that's a big part of the comfort factor. So somehow or another, they're going to need to address that in the future, I think. And hopefully, as Buster said, they'll come out of their slump at some point and start hitting 300.
I mean, when was the first time Buster started to recruit in free agency? Because I think he's 0 for 0
he's
for
0 for a lot. Buster is a much worse recruiter than he is a hitter.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it feels like you're sending, Mac Williamson up to the plate right there. He looks like he should be the guy, but he doesn't really deliver. So no offense.
Okay. So despite the fact that the Dodgers have this land of giants lineup, I still come back to what we said last week, which is that there is a counterpunch, and the counterpunch is pitching and run prevention.
Yeah.
It's, the Dodgers rotation is almost missing in action right now. So beating them into that punch, I still think is a strategy to being competitive. And so a couple of days later, we hear now credible reports that Jung Hoo Lee, who we knew the Giants were on, has been signed and brought in, which I think is a fantastic first step. And I have a bunch of thoughts on this, but I'm just going to get yours first. Kind of what's your response to this signing?
Well, I'm so glad that you said first step, because to me, that's what it is. Like, getting Jung Hoo Lee to San Francisco is a major move if it's the first of many moves, because he is potentially a table setter at the top of the order if his contact skills translate to Major League Baseball, and a lot of scouts think they will. He's got tremendous plate discipline, which is what you want at the top of the order, and he solidifies a position that has just been a black hole for the Giants for so long. Center field at Oracle Park and in the National League West, they've never had consistency. They've struggled forever. I mean, Gary Brown was supposed to be the center fielder more than a decade ago. Gary Brown's going to be a general manager before he's ever the center fielder of the San Francisco Giants. And so I love the signing for so many reasons, but you and I both know it can't just end here. This does give them other avenues, though, Roger, to really upgrade the roster, right?
Absolutely. And let me follow on that. But first, I will say there's a bunch of different things. So let me really fast go through things I like about this signing. I like that they were bold and they didn't get into this sort of we're in the finalist stage. It seems to me like they went and topped the mark and said, here's a big bonus on top of whatever your market is, sign with us now. And he did. So I like that they were bold and they got the guy they liked. I really, really love that with Lee signing, you have a 25-year-old center fielder, a 25-year-old catcher, a 22-year-old shortstop, and a 27, 28-year-old second base. Can you think of any time in your Giants following history where they had an entirely 20-something up the middle roster?
I can think of the outfield that was like a 38-year-old Bonds, a 40-year-old Steve Finley, and like a 39-year-old Reggie Sanders at the time. I mean, you can think about all the guys over 35 that Brian Sabian just planted in left field and said, go get it. But this has got to be the most exciting young core. And that's a great reason to sign Jung Hoo Lee, is because he is not coming over to the United States as someone who's past his prime. He's coming over as someone who is about to enter his prime, who, in theory, his best days as a baseball player should be ahead of him. If he recovers from this injury that took him out the second half of the KBO season, if he regains his speed, if the contract skills translate, it's all going to work out for a guy who maybe it's not a $113 million player, but a 25-year-old center fielder is something the Giants would have loved to have had at any point over the last, 30
years.
I mean, when was the last time the Giants felt really good about a young center fielder in the organization?
Chili Davis.
Exactly.
That's the answer. And he wasn't particularly a center fielder. He was just, he could hit, but really that is the answer. And I like the last time you had anything like it really goes back to Bob Melvin when he was the backup catcher, teaming with like Robbie Thompson and Jose Uribe and Chili Davis. I mean, that's the last. You have to go back to like 40 years, 35 years to find something like this. And just old and slow up the middle has been such an issue for this team for so long. We make such a big deal of the left field streak. But all three outfield positions have been just a revolving door of old
Yeah.
for a long, long, long time. And it's going to be really refreshing to see all of these guys. I just wrote this in a piece I'm going to put out tomorrow. All of these guys have uncertainty, but it's not the uncertainty of decline, which is what you've been dealing with for years at these spots. So I'm really excited about that. I also really like about Lee that his skill set is different.
Yes,
Because I do
absolutely.
believe that diverse skill sets make a more resilient, more robust club. It's okay to have sluggers and strikeouts, but not 9 of them. And you mix in some of these contact guys like Lee and maybe a Matos and maybe a Meckler, along with the JD Davises and Lamont, Wade's on base percentage. And now you start building a club that can score in a variety of ways. So I think that's a really useful thing.
I wonder, Roger, now that Lee is aboard, or in theory aboard, he's got to pass the physical and it's an ankle issue. So, there's no guarantees in San Francisco
No
with that.
pending physical.
But what do you see is like the next domino here? Or what are the potential dominoes that can come out of this signing? Because there's a whole world of possibilities. They could double down on pitching. They could trade some of their young outfielders or some of their veteran outfielders. Like, what makes sense to you as the best path forward?
Absolutely, it is pitching. And obviously we know they met with Yamamoto this week, and that's going to be tough because both New York teams are in it. The Dodgers are in it. Everybody wants this guy. So you're going to have to go, to the mattress. But at the same time, we're hearing stories about the Dodgers trying to get Tyler Glasnow. Corbin Burns is out there. Blake Snell is out there. One guy I don't think does it. I think it's get me 2 top guys and fill in around that. I would not even be satisfied with just Yamamoto personally. I'm like, you have to create a Death Star of pitching to compete in this rotation, in this division right now.
Yeah, I think that the Giants under Bob Melvin should do something different than what they did under Gabe Kapler, which was we're going to use all 26 players on the roster to win a game on any given day. And, on bullpen days, we're going to use 9 different pitchers, give you all the different arm angles. And at the end of the day, we're going to suppress your runs. We're going to scratch a few across, and that's going to work for us. I think under Bob Melvin, like you just said with the pitchers, the Giants should know every 5th day that they've got an opportunity to win a ball game. And I think that with Logan Webb, with Alex Cobb, with Kyle Harrison potentially morphing into a really solid major league starter this year, and it may not happen right away, and it may not happen in 2024, but down the line, I think we both expect him to be that. You've got to give yourself a chance to win every day, and that starts with having confidence in the guy on the mound, and that starts with knowing who's going to take the mound every 5th day, which is something the Giants just didn't have. I think one of the great ideas about signing Yamamoto is fans can buy tickets for those games. Fans can buy tickets when Logan Webb's set to pitch. You can market a Jung Hoo Lee and you can market a Matt Chapman, and that might work out if you sign those players. But if you get ace caliber pitchers in a Blake Snell or a Corbin Burns, you can say to your fan base, every 5th day, more likely than not, we're going to win that ball game. And I just pitching with the athletic defenders is the ultimate counter to what the Dodgers and the Padres have right now.
Yeah, my ideal really is Kyle Harrison is fighting for the 4th or 5th spot in the rotation in spring, right? Because I am the world's biggest Kyle Harrison fan. I know he's going to turn into a good major league pitcher, possibly a great major league pitcher, but I don't want him coming to spring feeling like he shoulders the fate of this team. I want him to feel like he can contribute kind of way Logan Webb did in 2021 when he was not the 5th starter kind of lined up in spring.
You want to talk about a great spring training memory. I mean, Logan Webb, my goodness, that spring, every guy he struck out with the changeup. It was just the best pitch I've ever seen. And that was coming off of learning about Kevin Gausman's splitter back in 2020, when you just saw how silly that was. Logan Webb's changeup in the Cactus League is like, World Series era Madison Bumgarner sliders.
The other thing about Kyle, not to sidetrack us here, but he barely pitched last spring. He made like 3 appearances. He threw 2 or 3 innings. It was not really setting him up for success. I remember talking to him over at minor league camp, like just a couple days before he broke. And I think he'd hit 3 innings for the first time all spring at that
Yeah.
point. And I'm like, how much are you going to be ready to go? And he's like, yeah, we'll do what we can. But he did not really get a great launching pad last spring, and I expect that to be very different this spring. And again, a team that has him as a fifth starter is in good shape. But that's where it's all going to go, I think, in the next week or so for the Dodgers and the Giants, and probably the Diamondbacks too. Is there's going to be an arms race coming, I think.
Yeah, I don't know that I have a great feeling about Yamamoto right now. I may if the Dodgers trade for Tyler Glasnow, and that deal gets done because there's the proposed trade that I think Ken Rosenthal was talking about earlier in the day on Wednesday that would send Ryan Pepio out of the division to Tampa Bay.
Yeah.
But Glasnow's set to earn $25 million. He's never crossed more than 120 innings in his major league career. And so if the Dodgers get him and they've added Ohtani, can you really afford I don't care how, if you defer $800 billion in Yamamoto deal, but can you really afford to add him as well?
So the one thing that I think, and I've written a lot about the Giants pitching depth and how deep I really think it is, but one place where I think they are well positioned, bringing up Glasnow, I don't know if they're going to get involved in trade talks with him, but you would deal with Glasnow, Blake Snell, even Yamamoto, because you never know how the six-day rotation, the 5-day rotation goes. I feel really good about the guys the Giants have that can get you that extra like 60, 80 innings on top of 120 innings from Glasnow or Snell.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't necessarily want Tristan Beck or Keaton Wynn, starting 35 times, but getting those guys to give you the 80 innings on top of Snell that gets you 200 innings, well, that actually sounds pretty good to me.
Yeah.
And that is a place where that depth, I think, is really going to help them this year. But to me, that's the clear thing. There needs to be, I mean, it would be great to get Matt Chapman. We've talked about that. 2 really good starting pitchers, I think, is what we have to be going at this point.
Fully on board with that plan. So my next question for you, Roger, Giants have Jung Hoo Lee theoretically under contract before he passes this physical. They've got Michael Conforto, they've got Mitch Haniger, they've got Austin Slater, they've got Mike Yastrzemski, they've got Wade Meckler, they've got Luis Matos. Someone isn't on this team next year. Someone's getting traded, and maybe multiple players. Who's most likely at this point?
So I was very recently having this discussion in a Discord group. I don't think it's easy to move some of the players they have, because they have a lot of players who are projected to be below average major league starters. And I don't think it's easy to trade below average major league starters at this point in the season, especially who cost a lot. But there has to be some movement off the roster just to prune a bit, because you've got at least 10 of 13 position players right now returning from what was the worst offense in the majors over the final 3 months of the year. You just can't bring that whole group back. I think it's going to take some creativity and some flexibility, but I would be working very hard to see what interest there is in several of these corner guys, whether it's Conforto, Davis, even Wade, who I think is really valuable, but I think I've said this before, between his knees and his turning 30, I do worry if we've already seen the best of him. Haniger, Slater, another guy who, health was a real issue last year. And I think Slater is a guy that, between Matos and Ramos, maybe they don't have the greatest pinch hitter in big league history anymore, but I think they can replace that value. So some way, somehow, I think they have to offload some of those guys in whatever deals are coming.
Yeah, I think that it's not ideal, but you might be giving up young talent to go out and get yourself an ace. You see how the market unfolds with Yamamoto. You see how the market unfolds with Snell. They've got to get one of those guys. They really should get one of those guys. Blake Snell, to me, if you miss out on Yamamoto, just overpay him. Just overpay him to come to San Francisco. He's from the Pacific Northwest, so he's comfortable with the climate. I think that you get that deal done, and then you say, okay, what's it going to take Milwaukee for Corbin Burns? And If you have to throw in, a Luciano and make it a mega deal, maybe you get Adamas back. I know that a lot of Giants fans, I said that on YouTube the other day, a lot of Giants fans were heavily criticizing me. But I'll tell you, Roger, 22-year-olds with back issues, those don't get better when you're 28 or 30. I can say that as someone who doesn't play baseball and has woken up with back issues. I think you've got to be creative. Dylan Cease, it feels like the asking price is too high. Shane Bieber feels like a natural fit because the Guardians are loaded with Giants coaches. I just don't look at Bieber as an ace anymore. So where do you go?
I mean, if I were making a pref list, it would certainly be Burns at the start, and then Glasnow number 2. And I mean, the problem with Burns is I don't think they have any inclination to move him without getting an overpay at this point in time. They might as well just see what they can do because they're Milwaukee and they're going to kind of retool a little bit, and then if they move him in July. But he would certainly be my number one target, particularly with the local team angle. So you feel like maybe if you get him in, that you could re-sign him to a deal. But I agree. I don't think this is necessarily a time where you have to say we can't move young talent. I mean, moving unproven for proven is how the industry goes. It's part of why you have a farm system. It's a important use of a farm system. The Giants just signed as a minor league free agent Yusniel Diaz, who you might recall as being the key chip in the Manny Machado deal, 6 years ago. That's how those deals go, man.
The Orioles-Dodgers deal?
The Orioles-Dodgers deal.
Wasn't Breivik Valera forever Giant in that
Breivik Valera who's been with the Orioles like 5 times since then.
Oh, God.
Dean Kramer was also in that deal, who turned out to be the best player the Orioles got.
Amazing.
I'm not a hug your prospects guy. I'm a player development guy, and I love all my prospects, but I understand that moving them for proven now value and letting them get good somewhere else, that's part of how you use the farm system. Hopefully you make the right choices, because you don't want to be the one who traded Fernando Tatis Jr., for James Shields. But do you think the Dodgers sit around at night crying about how they traded Yordan Alvarez for a?
I bet they sit around crying at night over that one. I bet that's the only thing they sit around crying about. But trading Yordan Alvarez for Josh Fields is one for the record books.
Hey, let me ask you another thing. Once again, I'll use you as my native San Franciscan person on this. Famously, the Giants had the first ever Japanese-born major leaguer. But over the many decades since then, there has not been much of an Asian presence on the San Francisco team, despite the fact that we have a long tradition of Asian communities in the city.
Yeah.
Is that something that you think is a cool aspect of the Lee signing and a potential Yamamoto signing? Because I think about like Fernando Mania, when Fernando Valenzuela blew up in LA, he was really good, but part of what made that sensational was the regional ties to Mexico and have a Mexican star. How important to you is it that the Giants actually start turning towards Asia and bringing in those players?
I've said this from day one on the beat. Like, this was a idea that I thought about constantly on the beat, and it's, why are the Giants not pushing their way into the KBO and into Japan to scout more frequently and sign players more frequently, even if they're just role players? Because the idea of engaging a new fan base, and not just over in Korea or over in Japan, but right there at home in your community, it's a no-brainer to me. It's getting people who may not come to Oracle Park excited about the idea of baseball, excited about seeing someone they identify with. It's representation. It's everything that really makes baseball such a worldly game. And it's one of the reasons I love the World Baseball Classic. You see all these countries and their fan bases get into it. I always thought this is a no-brainer for the San Francisco Giants. San Francisco prides itself on its diversity, and yet the team, I think I was covering a game at what's the ballpark? It was Truist Park down in Atlanta. I don't know what it's called now, but the Giants didn't have enough player tickets to spread around to everyone who wanted to get their family to the ballpark because they had 8 guys from rural Georgia. I mean, it just made no sense to me. I know there's pockets of Georgia with incredible baseball talent, but like I was talking to Hunter Strickland back in like 2018. He was like, I couldn't get my best friend to the game. Every ticket was scalped in the Giants clubhouse. And yet you have the opportunity right there at home in San Francisco to build a fan base that may or may not be engaged or may be curious about getting out to Oracle Park. And as soon as you see someone who's worn the Korea uniform in the World Baseball Classic or the Japan uniform in the World Baseball Classic, and someone who's shown up on social media timelines, and someone who's young, vibrant, exciting, like a 25-year-old Jung Hoo Lee is, like a 25-year-old Yoshinobu Yamamoto is, it's like you overpay for that because you're paying for the business that you're getting into right there. And I hope they do this elsewhere too. Like I hope they look at markets that historically have been overlooked in baseball, and they try and develop prospects from there because it just, if you only put your chips in the amateur draft basket and signing 1 or 2 big players out of the Dominican Republic when they're 16 years old, it's never going to work out for you in terms of a business standpoint, in my opinion, unless you're a juggernaut that wins the World Series 3 times in 5 years.
Yeah, and I think Jung Hoo Lee is not a star. He's not a star baseball player, but he's going to be a guy that this fan base really responds to. I bet you're going to see a lot of Lee jerseys get purchased once the signing's named for Christmas. People are going to get Lee jerseys, I think. And it was interesting to me that Posey, in that article we discussed before, talked about the fact that those teams were not just winners, but Tim Lincecum and Pablo Sandoval were fun players to watch, and that put a buzz in the stadium that was different and unique. And you can see that with Lee. I mean, if you watch his videos on YouTube, the swinging at balls at his ankle and lacing doubles into that's fun. That's gonna be fun.
I have several friends who are San Diego Padres fans, and I will tell you that yes, they had Juan Soto last year and Manny Machado last year and Fernando Tatis, but their favorite player to watch was Ha-Seong Kim because of the style of play, because he ran the bases so well, because he was electric in the field. And maybe Jung Hoo Lee isn't the athlete that Ha-Seong Kim was or is for the San Diego Padres, but he brings so many qualities to the table, like the Sandoval contact ability, where you're going to see pitches hit next year that shouldn't be hit, and they're going to fall for base hits. And he's going to take, I saw a highlight today of Jung Hoo Lee where he, drilled the ball into right field, runner from second coming home, and the throw sails over the cutoff man, and Jung Hoo Lee was rounding first base and never stopping. He was taking second base, and it's something that the Dodgers have historically done against the Giants ever since I've been watching them. It's something that the Arizona Diamondbacks did to the Giants all season long. It's taking the extra base and playing the game in a way that resonates with fans. And no, Jung Hoo Lee's exit velocity is not going to be 112 miles an hour, but if his batting average is above 300, if he's running around the diamond making plays in center field, people are going to love that. Kevin Pillar, classic example. Guy made a lot of diving catches, and fans love that. Were the metrics favorable? No. Was he overall adding value to the 2019 Giants? He got a 10th place MVP vote from my friend Henry Schulman, but
there you go.
but overall, people just love to watch excitement, and Jung Hoo Lee brings an exciting style of play.
We want to watch people run. I mean, that's part of having fun at the ballpark, and part of, again, having different skill sets. And you mentioned Kim, whose best friend Lee and former teammate on the Heroes is going to be a free agent not too far down the line. So, I wouldn't mind collecting a couple of these guys.
It's why maybe Roger, real quick, you trade for Willy Adames and Corbin Burns, and you give up Luciano, knowing that you have the potential to add a shortstop next year on the free agent market who's played for Bob Melvin and is friends with Jung Hoo Lee.
That is a viable strategy. I mean, absolutely. So I think we have decided that the next time we talk, we are going to be talking about the Giants getting Yamamoto and Burns and and lining up for the year. That's what we're going to be
No
saying next
one,
time, right?
no one spends Greg Johnson's money better than
And his prospects.
exactly.
We'll spend them both.
Yeah.
And then we'll add Matt Chapman on top, and somehow we'll offload a couple of players.
I did want to ask you real quick. Stripling, DeSclafani, Conforto, Haniger, any of those contracts unloadable?
I get, I mean, Stripling and Conforto both announced that they were not worth their contract on the market, right? That's what an opt-in does. Haniger's got 2 years left. You know, Disco is an absolute no. I mean, he's almost a DFA guy for me if he doesn't look healthy. I kind of say no. I mean, I don't know. Slater, it may be the easiest to move of the bunch, really. And Haniger, I would feel a little hesitant because you gotta feel like he's going to represent a little better next year, right? I mean, so you don't want to get rid of him as at a low value. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe Slater and attach him to like Davis and then sign Chapman. Something like that has to happen, I think.
I like that thought about packaging an outfielder with Davis to get Chapman. There's a team that could take that on.
It is difficult. I know guys on the people on the internet always want to move players all the time, but what teams are doing right now in the winter is trying to line themselves up for this year and get this year's value. And if they're getting players like that, they're trying to get starters most of the time. And I think that's a tough call for some of these guys.
Yeah, I would agree.
Well, we accomplished a lot this week. Hopefully next week will be as action-packed, maybe.
Yeah, well, next week we're going to be talking about Yoshinobu Yamamoto's $300 million in deferred money with the San Francisco Giants.